Hi, today we're going to make a loaf of artisan sourdough bread baked in a Dutch oven. The recipe will be down below in the description. This is the most baked recipe in our home. We like to eat this bread fresh. We like to have it in the morning as toast. It makes excellent grilled ham and cheese sandwiches, and it also makes wonderful croutons. So follow along, and it's very beginner friendly, and I will show you how to make it. Get a mixing bowl, and you need just an inexpensive kitchen scale that does grams. I have this recipe in grams, and you're going to set your bowl on your scale and zero it out. And the recipe calls for 500 grams of flour. I'm using bread flour. You can also use all-purpose flour, and we'll get into the science behind each of them later as we're doing our stretch and folds. But for now, 500 grams of either bread flour or all-purpose flour. Next, you'll need 400 grams of water. Go ahead and zero your scale. 400 grams. Zero again. And 12 grams of table salt. Okay, now for the sourdough. I have a whole wheat sourdough starter, but you can use anything. You can use an all-purpose flour starter, whatever you want. Whatever kind you have, you need 140 grams of active starter. And it does not have to be exact, get it close. You'll need either a wooden spoon or a whisk, and go ahead and mix that up well. By a whisk, I mean this kind. It works really well. A wooden spoon works great. Carefully stir it until it's all combined. Sure to scrape the edges. So all the dough is combined. Now, that's what your dough should look like. And we're going to leave it for about 30 minutes. We're going to let it rest, and we'll be back to do our first stretch and fold. So we're going to do our first stretch and fold. You can see what the dough looks like. It's really tacky. I like to do this with one hand, and you reach in. I'll tip the bowl up so you can see. You reach in and you grab some of the dough and you stretch it up, and before it breaks, you fold it over. And the farther along you get in this process, when you stretch and fold the next several times, it won't be this tacky. And then you grab another section of the dough and you pull it up and you fold it over. You grab it a third time, pull it up and fold it over, and then you grab kind of the last section of dough and you pull it up and you fold it over, and that is one session basically of a stretch and fold. So we have done our first stretch and fold. This is called the bulk ferment. Basically, we're going to leave our dough out on the counter, and several times throughout the day, I'm going to do these stretch and folds. I like to get about 4 in. I've had perfectly good results with as little as 2 stretch and folds if something came up and I got busy and I wasn't here to do it. But generally, I like to get about 4 in. And the bulk ferment period will take about 6 to 7 hours. And then I will show you what I do after that. An important thing to note is why we do the stretch and folds. We do the stretch and folds to develop the gluten in the bread. So in your flour are 2 proteins. They're called glutenin and gliadin. And when you add liquid to your flour, this activates those proteins. Once they're activated, they are attracted to each other and they link together. As they continue to link together, they form elastic strands, which we call gluten. These gluten strands then intertwine to form networks. And as you do your stretch and folds, you are encouraging the formation of that gluten. You're encouraging those proteins to link together and form strands, and then you're encouraging those strands to form networks. And these networks of gluten then trap the gases that are released as your sourdough ferments. So your sourdough ferments and releases these gases, and your strands, your networks of gluten, capture these, and then that is what causes your bread to rise. It happens over the bulk ferment period, which for today, like I said, is going to be about 6 or 7 hours. I will just kind of walk by, and whenever I think of it, I'll do another stretch and fold. Like I said, I like to get about 4 good stretch and folds in if possible. Now, if you use bread flour, that has a higher percentage of the proteins in it than the all-purpose flour does. So the bread flour gets better gluten development than the all-purpose flour, but the all-purpose flour will work just as well. And fold that I'm gonna do so you can see the consistency of the dough has changed. It's way more elastic than when we first started out. This is the 4th time I'm doing this, and it will be the final time. Stretch and fold over, stretch and fold over, stretch it and fold over, and then it will stay on the counter for a few more hours. So the bulk ferment is done. You can see our dough is just about doubled in size. Doubled in size is what you want. So the next step is to shape it into a loaf. So you'll need a bannetone basket, or if you have any kind of a bowl that's shaped like this is fine, as long as it's not bigger than the Dutch oven you're going to cook it in, or your loaf won't fit. So, and you need something to put inside. I have this little cover that goes in it, but a tea towel works just fine. Get it fitted in there. And then I like to sprinkle some flour in there just to keep it from sticking. And next is to shape your loaf. So sprinkle some flour. Get your dough out of your bowl and kind of pat it into a rectangle, flour your hands if you need to, and it doesn't have to be exact. And just fold it over, and then I like to fold one side over and fold the other side over and make it into a ball, and just kind of go around a couple times and tuck the end in, tuck the bottom in until you have a nice round ball. It's nice and smooth and elastic, and the top will go in your bowl upside down like that. And what I do, I cover it in plastic wrap and I allow it to do an overnight rise in the refrigerator. You have to cover it though so it doesn't dry out. If you started early enough in the day, you could definitely bake this loaf in one day. You would let it do its bulk ferment after you mixed it up and did your stretch and folds. And then after you shaped it, you would leave it on the counter until it had about doubled in size, and then you would bake it. But I like to mix it up, let it do its bulk ferment, do my stretch and folds, shape it into a loaf, and then put it in the refrigerator overnight, and I bake it the next morning. So it is the next day, and I have taken the bread out of the refrigerator, and I'm going to uncover, take the plastic wrap off, and I'm going to set it next to the oven in a warm spot, and then I'm going to preheat the oven to 450 degrees. And then I'm going to take the Dutch oven with the lid on, and we're going to set it in the oven for 20 minutes. So I'm going to set my timer. And the purpose of that is to let the Dutch oven heat up to 450 degrees as the oven is preheating. Okay, our 20-minute timer has just gone off. So our Dutch oven is preheated to 450 degrees. And you're going to bring it out and carefully set it. It is very hot. And we'll leave the oven on at 450 degrees. That's the temperature that we will bake at. So now you get your loaf of bread in your bannetone basket, and I'm going to show you how to carefully put it in your Dutch oven. First, you'll need parchment paper. You want to make it just wider than what your loaf is going to be. And I like to use a plate. So I set my parchment paper on the plate and set it upside down. And then it's easy to just gently turn it over. And then carefully take your tea towel or whatever off. Now the next step is to get a very sharp knife or a razor, and you're going to make some cuts in the bread. So I like to do a simple X or a cross on top. Just make some nice cuts in there. Now you're going to lift the lid off of your Dutch oven. You're going to pick up the parchment and carefully set your loaf inside like that. Slide it over here so you can see it better. You're going to carefully set your loaf inside. Kind of tuck the parchment in. If a little bit of parchment sticks out, it's not a big deal. You're gonna put your lid back on, make sure it's on there tightly, and then you're gonna put it back in the oven. Now we're gonna go ahead and set the timer for 30 minutes. And it's going to bake for 30 minutes with the lid on. And when that timer goes off, you're gonna pull the lid off and you'll bake it for an additional 5 to 10 minutes. There's the 30-minute timer. So we're just gonna reach in here. Pull the lid. And we're gonna bake it for 5 more minutes. All right, it finished the 5 minutes baking time without the lid. I've set my pan on a cooling rack, and now I'm gonna carefully lift the bread out by the parchment paper. Now I know when it's done because the cut edges where you cut with the razor blade, if they're a nice toasty brown color, that means your bottom will be as well. That's just perfect. And that is how you make a loaf of artisan sourdough bread in the Dutch oven. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the cast iron cooking videos. Thank you very much.